guys. Welcome to Eden Eye Tarot, where we illuminate your stars and your cards. We are getting into a little bit of a review of the full moon in Aries today. I haven't actually looked at this chart since the beginning of October. And so it's going to be, I guess, a little bit of a review for myself as well. Before we get started here, if you could do me a favor and give me a like, a subscribe if you haven't already, share this with a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend. We are trying to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers by March 10th, 2025, which is my birthday. So if you want to give me a free birthday gift, go ahead and do that for me. I would appreciate it. It would help the channel grow. Um, Grab your snacks, wine, pillows, all the things. We are going to jump right into this full moon. So, just as a review, when we have full moons, we're talking about something coming to its completion or something coming to an end. But in the sign of Aries, Aries is about beginnings. It's also about like some sort of like achievement in some sort. It can be about like fighting to achieve something or coming out from under something. um, think about the planet of Mars, but also the time of which Aries is actually the time of year that Aries season is actually happening, which is why I say there's almost like this fight to like come up from under something that feels a bit oppressive. And so it's like its own conquering, its victory when we think about Aries energy. Being coupled with, of course, its ruler Mars. And this is a really interesting full moon. We have the full moon in Aries. A moon in Aries in general is going to bring some sort of new beginnings. It can bring hot tempers, of course, but it can bring like lots of new inspiration, new creativity, new ideas. It can be a very sexy time as Mars is partially responsible for sexual acts having to do with penetration, things like that. We cannot forget. But also, when we're looking at the sign of Aries, it's a lot about action. No matter how you spin it. You do want to be careful when you have the moon in Aries happening. I think one of the lovely things is that the moon in Aries can create, a lot of action, a lot of movement, a lot of wanting to, get things heated up. And heat doesn't always have to be bad. It is a fire sign after all. And so getting things moving, making things less stagnant, and actually having them move forward is really what a moon in Aries is great for. But on the other hand, we can see people being a bit more accident prone because of that movement without thinking, or taking action without thinking, or even really doing any planning first. And so it can be a very spontaneous time. Um, this moon is at a 24, and so I can imagine like a lot of creativity coming up. 24 is a Pisces degree. We can see just kind of like a lot of feelings associated with this moon as well. And so I say that, we can see maybe like um, a bit of hot-headedness when we're dealing with ourselves and other people. But the beautiful thing about Aries is because it's a cardinal sign, it's kind of like a very much a shit or get off the pot kind of energy. And it might be quick to anger, but it also fizzles out very quickly as well. And so you want to be aware of, especially since it is in a Pisces degree, it can be doubly so guilty of, starting something and then kind of drifting away from it, since Pisces is a double bodied sign and it's all about transitioning in and out of things. And so it can be like, a lot of inspiration, right? It's hot and heavy. And then you kind of get distracted with other things. But Pisces is also about dreams as well. And so I can see this being like just like a very artistic, creative time, and really having the energy to do something a bit more isolating, or, a bit more creative by yourself. Speaking of isolation, Aries is about I am, or I think that's the motto for Aries, but it is about the self. Pisces can be a lot about isolation. And so I can see a lot of people wanting to maybe go within themselves, or just spend time alone. But what's interesting is that we see the ruler of this full moon in Aries in Mars, Mars in Cancer. Sorry about that. And it's coming up to a direct square with the actual full moon. So we see the ruler squaring off with the full moon that is ruling over. And that is actually at a 22. And so it can be a Capricorn degree where it can be like, what is real? Where's the structure? And so it's kind of challenging. Um, its own ruler is challenging the full moon in Aries to be like, okay, you started this, but you have to finish it. And how do you plan to finish it? And I can imagine a lot of people being like, well, I don't really, I have concepts of a plan. Again, I think we talked about this in the beginning of October, is that there's going to be a lot of this feeling of concepts of a plan happening. But I think we'll see a lot of maybe authority figures or parents, especially like mother figures. I could see with Cancer, since the moon is women, saying this is your responsibility. You need to create structure. What is your plan? There can be things coming up at work where there are some, maybe upsetting changes when it comes to structures at work or with authority figures, or, what are your responsibilities, and some changes coming with that as well. You want to be very careful about like maybe issues having to do with like getting into any kind of like spats with authority figures. Really take the time to figure out if it's worth it or not. If you have, do not make threats that you can't follow up, and back up. I would say with Mars squaring off with the moon in Aries for sure, because when we see Mars in Cancer is very passive. It can be very passive aggressive, but I think one thing that it is really good at is being like very determined. Um, and about finding security. And it can be just very hardworking in that sense. And so I do think it's possible to find longevity in action, but I would say to make sure that you are planning things out. The downside of Mars and Cancer is that Mars and Cancer is going to sidestep things. It's not going to go at things directly. It's going to go kind of around them. On one hand, I could see this going really well, especially if you do have concepts of a plan and you just kind of are figuring things out as you go. Mars and Cancer for this full moon can be a really good way to be like, I can see, in the situations with people, relating to people, it can be a lot about, I'm not sure yet. And so therefore I kind of like don't give a direct answer. And so I just kind of sidestep things and say, oh yeah, I'll get back to you in a couple days, but this is what we're doing for right now. And I can see the other person saying, well, I want to answer right now. um, and so a lot of emotions can kind of, be kicked up because of that, especially because a full moon is when a moon is at its mooniest. And so all the emotions are kind of on display. And so we can see that as well. Let's look at what else we can kind of look forward to, what else is happening with this moon. It looks like we have Venus. Actually, I want to come back to that. We have Mercury in Scorpio. Again, really, I think very intense communication is what we're going to see like with this, and with especially with Mercury and Scorpio. Scorpio being another traditionally ruled Mars sign. There can be a lot of people just like people in leadership positions, especially, or people wanting to lead a situation, just being very hot and heavy on how they kind of demand things. It's not a act. This whole energy of this moon is not asking kind of energy. It's a demanding kind of energy. But I do think you come up against some opposition when you have demands being given to you, especially when it comes up against like leadership or authority roles. But it creates a amazing time with Mercury and Scorpio to ask the questions that maybe can provide better structure. um, of course the sun is in Libra, and so I'd say, on one end I do see the um, the great opportunity to weigh things out. People might feel that you're being a bit indecisive. Again, Mars and Cancer, that you're being maybe a bit passive and sidestepping things. But I would really urge you to not let others um, provoke you into acting too quickly. With this moon in particular, take your time. Really, when I look at not only Mercury in Scorpio, but also Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer is trying Saturn in Pisces. And so things become a lot more solid when you take time to create structure for them. It's slow to act. That trine with Mars and Saturn in Pisces is slow to act. It's strategic. Think very much Mars retrograde vibes. This will be a great kind of precursor to the Mars retrograde that we'll see in December. And so I'd say with this full moon, the best thing that you can do is to take your time. Things will come to completion on their own, and new beginnings will be born. But I'd say, if you are getting some pushback or pushes to act quickly and you're not completely sure about the outcome of a situation, especially if it's long term, because I can see people really thinking about like what is needed right now rather than what is needed in the long term, what is a quick fix versus what will be a better long-standing answer or resolution to a situation, instead of just putting a band-aid on it. And so I really I've heard this that this that this full moon is being called a hellraiser. I think I can see it. I can see it. But we also do have, speaking of Scorpio energy, I do want to come back to this Venus in the Scorpio energy, where we have Mars and Cancer that's already kind of in it's not a super comfy place for Mars to be. Cancer is very passive. Mars likes to be direct and it likes action. Venus in Scorpio is also not where it likes to be, where Venus likes to be either. Scorpio is a Mars ruled sign. Venus is Venus. It's opposing energies, and so it can be a lot of heat and intensity and obsession, and just kind of like a bit tumultuous when we're talking about relationships with other people. There's lots of opportunity for transformation and conversations that can transform our relations with others, or really asking those questions that can give us a lot of great insight into our relationships as well as like our own self-esteem. It's a great time for reflecting, maybe talking to a professional. Scorpio can be related to like psychologists or therapists and things like that. I really urge you, even if you are not connected with that kind of professional, to journal as well. Like that whole Scorpio energy is great for going underneath the surface, digging out what we don't want to talk about, and taking time to really look at it and bring closure. Think the Judgment card in the tarot when we're talking about Scorpio energy, especially with Venus and Scorpio. But kind of coming back to Venus and Scorpio, it is opposed to Uranus in Taurus. Uranus in Taurus is bringing, shakeups to money and resources and what is ours. But it can also be shaking up beauty standards, self-esteem, shaking up stability as well. And Venus in Scorpio can be like maybe it can be maybe it clings on to what is, I think, more familiar, while simultaneously pushing towards vulnerability, which can bring something new. And so it can be, you are finding yourself having to change the way that you spend money or rebudget. It can also, be, reaching out to a friend or learning about some sort of new currency. I could see that as well. Or having to be put in a situation where you're having to learn about maybe how to pay something off. Scorpio is debt as well, and with that opposition to Uranus, Uranus is unexpected things, and so it can be a situation where I could see where you're having some unexpected expenses come up, and having to figure out how do I pay this off, kind of thing happening there. Um, what is we have Jupiter also over here, just kind of bringing things to a close. We have Jupiter that's making a trine to this moon. And so, again, talking things out, really focusing in on communication. We're still in Libra season. And so we have that air trine, going back and forth. Do not be afraid to be labeled as indecisive. As long as you are sticking to the reason why you're not making a decision or not making a move yet, and know that you will eventually make a decision or make a move. I think that's the most important part. As long as you're just not getting sidetracked, is I think what's most important here with this moon, because we have, of course, the sun in Libra, and then we have Jupiter in Gemini, which is all really bringing in that feeling of let's talk about this, let's learn together, let's ask questions, and really focus more so on the we side of things. And I think through focusing on the we, you are simultaneously also learning about the me or the you in the situation as well. And that can cause a lot of new kind of revelations about yourself and how you can operate going forward. I think it's a great opportunity to also create better boundaries for yourself when it comes to relationships. And so it can definitely shake things up when we're talking about this full moon for sure. But I think the biggest takeaway is don't let people rush you, as like kind of the general rule, whether it's with a decision or closing something out, like closing out a new project or starting a new project. Make sure you're asking all the really important questions. Don't be afraid to be curious, and stand up for yourself and create those boundaries and say, no, I'm not doing this actually. Even if people are coming with their demands and their 2 cents, be very focused on what your vision is, and stick to that. With the sun in Libra, it can be great to know when to compromise and when to kind of be like, no, this is not what I'm doing. I am not participating in this kind of thing. Because with the sun in Libra, we also have that square to Pluto. And so there can be some power struggles when we're talking about relationships. But we already kind of see that when we see Venus in Scorpio as well. And so, yeah, don't let anybody rush you, whether it's a decision or on the road or just kind of walking in particular. Remember that we are a bit more accident prone during a full moon in Aries. But I do think it's a wonderful time to really find more internal new beginnings in ourselves, and that projects externally in our actions into the world. But with that being said, that is the full moon in Aries. Please let me know how this full moon turns out for you. I would love to hear from you. But other than that, I will talk to you guys in the next one.